Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. I'll get to the bottom of whether they violated my order, who ordered this, and what the consequences will be. We have got that story coming up, plus another new decade this week, a whole just tranche of updates. But first, 23andMe bankruptcy. Who owns your DNA now? And James, we'd like to know that the answer to that question in the Media Monarchy and Corbett Report and New World Next Week audiences, you still do. Amid mounting challenges, 23andMe, a prominent U.S. genetic testing firm, has sought bankruptcy protection to pave the way for a potential sale, a move that champions individual privacy in an era of escalating data concerns. I mean to say, none of our audience sent their DNA into these people. Late Sunday, the company announced it had voluntarily entered Chapter 11 proceedings in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Eastern District of Missouri, aiming to facilitate a sale process to maximize the value of its business. The strategic shift coincides with the resignation of its co-founder and CEO, Ann Wojcicki, Sergey Brin's ex-girlfriend, stepped down to spearhead an independent bid to acquire the company after facing repeated rejections from its board. You might recall several months ago we reported all the board quit. Wojcicki, who launched 23andMe in 2006 alongside Linda Avey and Paul Kusenza, encountered significant hurdles in her vision to transform the company into a drug development powerhouse where that real dough is. Her ambition faltered as revenues plummeted, driven by a wave of customers out of a total of 15 million rushing to erase their DNA records from the company's systems post-breach. Oh yeah, they've had giant hack attacks as well. 23andMe's vast repository of user data, which they just stole from it. Oh wait, everybody willingly sent it in. Amassed through years of saliva-based ancestry testing, lies at the mercy of its own self-imposed guidelines rather than robust federal oversight. The company's 2023 data breach, which exposed sensitive deets like genetic predispositions and ancestry reports for nearly 7 million users, underscored the sheer volume of personal information it holds. For the millions who entrusted their DNA to 23andMe, the assumption might have been that such immediate data enjoys the ironclad protections of health insurance, portability, and accountability. We know it and love it here in the States as the HIPAA Act, a law designed to shield sensitive health information from unauthorized disclosure. Yet 23andMe operates outside HIPAA's reach, leaving it tethered only to its own privacy rules that it can rewrite at will. Just click submit. Just say you agree. This regulatory gap casts a long shadow over the company's future, especially as it teeters on the brink of a sale following its bankruptcy filing. A patchwork of inconsistent state privacy laws, coupled with the absence of a cohesive federal framework, we're going to get some crisis-tunity out of this, means that the genetic profiles of 15 million Americans could be up for grabs. According to 23andMe's privacy policy, customers' personal information may not be accessed, sold, or transferred in scenarios like bankruptcy, mergers, or acquisitions. While the company insists its data practices will remain unchanged post-sale, pledging to never share user information with insurance providers or law enforcement without a warrant, privacy advocates should remain skeptical. Notably, 23andMe's transparency report highlights its defiance against U.S. law enforcement requests for DNA data, a stance that it's held firm on thus far. Still, the prospect of new ownership raises alarm bells. Potential buyers might eye 23andMe's treasure trove of genetic material as a lucrative asset to exploit in ways the current management has resisted. In theory, 23andMe needs user approval to transfer data during an acquisition, but users could withhold it. Over a dozen states, including Montana, enacted genetic privacy laws requiring explicit consent. Montana's 2023 law, for instance, mandates standalone consent naming the buyer. Comparable rules apply in states like Alabama, Arizona, California, and others, with Wyoming uniquely offering a private right of action for consumers to enforce their rights in court. With the company's fate hanging in the balance, advocates are urging users to act swiftly to shield their data from an uncertain future. And this is where the article gets into go here, log in there, click on this, go to settings, select account information. But all of that, as noted in this article, comes with a catch. The company's privacy policy notes that deletion is, quote, subject to retention requirements and certain exemptions, meaning some data like genetic profiles, birth dates, gender, all the stuff you think you're erasing, may linger for unspecified periods to meet compliance obligations. Likewise, for those who previously consented to research use of their data, retracting that permission is possible. But like anything on your own little slave device, erasing the information entirely is not possible. Nothing is ever erased. Discussing this story, James, in my chat with a lot of the real, hardcore tech people who work in IT for decades for their career. They, of course, laugh at this. It's like nothing is ever erased. U.S. official alleges 23andMe sold Americans' DNA data to pharma companies owned by foreign adversaries. James, we might have buried the lead on that one, but man, I'll admit, Google might know that I watch a lot of retro gaming content, but I didn't send them my eyeballs. Good grief.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it. And yes, maybe we did bury the lead. I hope people will check into that Zero Hedge article that we're linking to that provides the link to the James O'Keefe undercover investigation with the U.S. Treasury Policy Advisor just casually admitting in one of those fake sting dates that they set up, hey, they have that thing in their policy that lets them share data with their shareholders, and all their shareholders are big pharma people, and a lot of them in foreign countries like Russia and China, which of course, feeds into the idea that it's only those foreign pharma companies that you got to worry about, guys. The American ones, totally fine. Yeah, right. Well, James, you started pretty hopefully there with who owns your DNA? Well, hopefully for our audience and for us, it's us. But unfortunately, hate to be the bearer of bad tidings and bad news, but if you were born in a hospital in basically the Western world in the past, say, 60, 70 years, at this point, they have your DNA, and they have been storing it and using it without your consent, and it is privately owned. And for people who need to know about that, I have been reporting on that. I first reported on that back in 2009 in an article called Announcing the DNA Control Grid. I followed it up with episode 118 of the Corbett Report on who owns your DNA. Answer, not you, actually. And if people still don't understand I can't even imagine what kind of nightmare scenario we're stepping into in this Gattaca world. I could point them to, for example, DNA shaming, Welcome to Orwell's Nightmare, talking about that old Gilvian Mathers genetic mugshot ad campaign, marketing campaign they were doing a few years ago, I believe in Hong Kong, was it? Where they were taking the litter from people's cigarette butts and stuff and getting the DNA off of it and constructing genetic profiles so they could put up billboards. Have you seen this man? He's a litterer, etc. Oh, how fun. How wonderful. I can't imagine how that would be used against us. Oh, wait, I guess I can, because, of course, the next threat, DNA exploitation. Yes, the U.S. government is warning about DNA exploitation of their citizens by the Chi-Coms. Don't worry about what the Americans are doing. Once again, it plays into that. I could cite all of those articles, but I don't have to, because we cited this in the last time we talked about this story, back last October, New World Next Week, number 569, Fang Goes Nuclear, where we covered story number 2, 23andMe reportedly faces bankruptcy. Well, here we are, yay, and now we got Ann Wojcicki, who's going to buy the company back, and don't worry, keep all that data safe with 23andMe's shareholders. What could go right?
When we've talked about these stories, I know back at the horrible apartment complex that we lived in when we first moved to New Mexico several years back, they were looking at the service called Poo Prints, where you give your dog's DNA and they can find who's not picking up their dog poop. See, again, that's that totalitarian tiptoe, because there's a part of me that could go, yeah, get those dirt bags. Also, this brings up, of course, the project for a new American century. This could take something from the realm of, what do they say, political theories into actual race-specific bioweapons. And that is the new world this week that we live in, and that's how we get going on New World Next Week, episode 586. Our second story, James, a really interesting one to me. And yes, we will have to mention the Orange Man. D.C. judge said U.S. treated Nazis better than Venezuelan migrants who were deported, grabbing this from the BBC, who would know a thing or two about sheltering Nazis. A U.S. appeals court judge on Monday said the U.S. gave Nazis better treatment during World War II than it did to hundreds of Venezuelans deported this month over alleged gang ties. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit heard arguments over the over the Trump administration's use of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to deport 238 alleged Venezuelan gang members to a mega prison in El Salvador. During a fraught 2-hour hearing, Judge Patricia Millett questioned the government's use of the law to deport Venezuelans without a way to challenge the allegations. There were plane loads of people, she said. Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemy Act than has happened here. Earlier, a federal judge refused to lift a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration from deporting Venezuelan migrants with the invocation of the wartime powers. The controversial Judge James Boasberg ruled that many of those deported dispute their gang affiliation and must be allowed to challenge their removal. Trump proclaimed on 15 March that members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua were conducting irregular warfare against the U.S., justifying their deportation under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. But later that evening, and again, that's pretty much how quickly everything has been moving these last few months, later that evening, Judge Boasberg issued a 14-day halt to deportations under the proclamation, verbally ordering the government to turn the flights around, and the White House said, sorry, bro, they're in the air already, it's too late. Now, James, I think I kind of like this story when the powers that shouldn't be all start to fight with each other. I'm sure we've talked about this before in different contexts, all New World next week. When they start to fight with each other, they'll start to admit and talk about all kinds of crap that, of course, we'd be crazy conspiracy theorists if we ever brought it up. But when they start to try and poke holes in each other, they'll start to talk about things like the U.S. treatment of Nazis. And maybe on the high point of hope that kids will go, U.S. Nazis, what? And then they'll learn about Project Paperclip, and then they'll start to get red-pilled, and then they'll be lifelong New World Next Week fans. What do you think, James?
I like the ending of that. Yeah, I agree, yes. To the extent that the system fights with itself, it does at the very least reveal some of the information that they otherwise would like to keep wrapped up. And I think that is one of the good things about the left-right system. At least there's half of the system in power that is at least putting up a somewhat half-hearted fight against the other half. And from that, I mean, obviously, who cares about the politics on the cave wall? But from that, at least people can get a glimpse into what's happening underneath. Anyway, this is exactly in line with what you were saying earlier. Yeah, get those dog poo non-picker-uppers. Yeah, they get what's coming. Get those Venezuelan gang members. I hate that. But the word alleged Venezuelan gang members is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Alleged. So now people can be alleged to be a Venezuelan gang member and then sent to El Salvador. No questions asked. Can't even stop the plane. Like what? No, absolutely no judicial oversight on that. Whatever. Just you're gone. And, of course, it has already happened. Oh, that gang sign that guy had on his tattoo. It was a crown on a soccer ball. It's a soccer-related tattoo. Who cares? You're already in El Salvador. No questions asked. So for people who cannot imagine why this might be a bad thing, get those Venezuelan gang members, alleged Venezuelan gang members. Try this on for size. Quote, no free man shall be seized or imprisoned, or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed, or exiled, or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him, or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals, or by the law of the land. Was that some sort of recent Supreme Court ruling or something? Was that maybe a constitutional document clause or something? No, that's from the Magna Carta, the freaking Magna Carta, 810 years ago. The foundations of Western jurisprudence and the entire concept of the legal system, due process of law, goes back at least 8 centuries and is being absolutely eviscerated in front of our eyes to the thunderous applause of people who think, hey, at least we're getting those Venezuelan gang members, right? And again, for the hard of thinking who do not understand what the real picture is here, even if every single one of those people really was a horrible Venezuelan drug gang member, okay, great. But you don't understand. No. They're destroying due process of law because they are coming for you. And one way that I would like to demonstrate that, I picked up on this story. It's a crazy story, but not for the reason that they think in the headline. So this comes from Zero Hedge. Inorganic. GPS data reveals Bernie Sanders' AOC anti-oligarchy rally was full of serial protesters. And it goes into this story, and we're supposed to go, yeah, those stupid, inauthentic Dem rallies, yeah. But it's actually a super creepy story because it shows this data analysis of these 34,000 quote-unquote protesters. No, there were only 20,189 devices there. And doing this data analysis, we can show that 84% of the devices present had attended 9 or more Kamala Harris rallies, Antifa, BLM, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian protests. 31% had attended over 20 of those. 90% of those in the above 84% were likely working with one of these 5 groups, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. How the hell do they know all of this precise data and information on every single person at that rally and every device and where those devices have been in the past and who these people are connected to? That, to me, is the story there. Not who was, great, yeah, it was another inauthentic rally. No, the point is they know who you are, where you are, what you're doing, who you have been in association with before. They can track that completely with absolute ease. And you don't think that the absolute evisceration of due process of law is coming for you if you, say, hey, I'm not comfortable with the Gaza genocide. Boom! To El Salvador with you. Anyway, I'm sure I'm not telling people things that they haven't heard before, but I hope I can connect those dots in a way that people might have a little bit of hesitation cheering on this cleaning up the streets.
And that has been the big story because, of course, the left here in the States needs some new thing to hang on to, pushing back against Orange Man. Bernie and AOC, that's the whole new dream team that were showing up at this big rally. But you're exactly right, James. I'm talking about it again on my morning show. It would be like saying, man, it seems like a lot of people at that concert liked that band. Yeah, that's the kind of people who would go to that sort of thing. But you're exactly right. The story is in the details. And what does it help you learn? To not only not play Politrix games, but to not carry a tracking device every single place that you go. Now also, none of this happened in a vacuum. Trump was not able to roll in and do all this stuff without things happening the previous 24 and a half years. 8 years of Bush helped. 8 years of Obama really helped. Yeah, destroying the Magna Carta has kind of been part of the operation for the last 20 years. And Cassie and I talk about this at home. Gridlock is the best thing generally we can hope for as far as the powers that shouldn't be. Gridlock, fighting, nothing's getting done, we've got bills, but they're stopping us. That's the best thing we can hope for. Because when they agree on crap, Israel, COVID, that's when you know you're in trouble. So fighting and squabbling is the best thing. Just don't look at them. Our third and final story on this New World Next Week, episode 586, is not just one story, but a whole trove. Because again, as we've noted, a lot of things moving quickly, a lot of decades happening these last few recent weeks. So a new decade this week and globe-trotting updates, and a huge thanks to video editor Brock West. EU covets citizens' savings to invest in its Rearm Europe plan. You recall us talking very recently about von der Leyen's Rearming Europe plan, and how do we know she wants to rearm Europe? Because they say we need more weapons. And again, anytime you see the word covet in a headline, James, we're getting to the biblical times, it seems like. Good grief. This is wild. Japanese court orders controversial Moonies Church disbanded. The Unification Church, no more in Japan. Again, I kind of think this might cause a giant pushback because you're limiting our religious freedoms. It's crazy. China's new weapon that can cut any undersea cable. James, this cracks me up. I tried to play the game of making other news headlines of they created this perfect thing to generate news headlines. Russia's new weapon that can add any corporate journalist to private war chats. That's another story raging on in the current news. Holy moly. Utah set to become the first state to end water fluoridation for all residents. The even better news, people who want fluoride still have the freedom to go get fluoride and COVID vaccinations and all the things they want. Censorship season opens as Canada's going to head to the polls with their new central banker, Ghislaine Maxwell, connected prime minister. And finally, good lord, stratospheric aerosol injection would change cloud brightness. I don't know how long and how many times I sit around, James, and just wonder and hope when the technocrats would manipulate the clouds more. What do you think?
Yeah. It's something I think about all the time. Man, I wish. Yeah, and it's another one of those, hey, here's a new study telling us this thing that we've known for decades now, but it's totally new, guys, and we're totally not doing it. Yeah, some important updates there. There's so much going through the news wires here that how can we possibly keep up with it all? Let me just touch on a couple of them. Yeah, the Japanese Moonies story is pretty crazy, pretty big. And I was all prepared to go in with my voluntarist principles and be like, well, yeah, obviously I'm not a Moonie, but how can the government just disband a church like that? Like that's not a power you want to give them. But then I read, when you read down into the story itself, they're not actually like outlawing the Moonies themselves. They are revoking the church's tax-exempt status and forcing it to sell off its assets. Yeah. However, it will still be allowed to continue its religious activities within Japan. So, I mean, there are still things we could quibble with there.
But they're hitting them where they know it hurts and where they know that it matters.
Where the real scam is happening. Yeah,
that's a good one. Huh.
Yeah, and we'll see how the Japanese, all the LDP members who have been funded by the Moonies in various ways, all the how they'll continue that grift in another way, because you know it's not going to end. And on the Utah story, great, yes. And exactly as you point out, yeah, all those people who are crying out in horror, won't someone think of our children's teeth? Wait, what's fluoridosis? And anyway, yeah, you still have the option. You can absolutely go and drug your kids up with fluoride. You are actually going to contribute to lower IQ in them, so I do not think you should do that. But hey, anyway, free country, right? So that's, yeah, good for Utah, and that's hopefully the first domino of many that will be falling. Again, I don't care about the political figures in Washington and whatever, but Maha and the idea that it represents is for the good. Anyway, yeah, tons of stuff. We could talk about so much more. We haven't even touched on the Ark of the Covenant or secret chambers underneath the pyramids, but hopefully you can get into that in your Thursday morning monarchy. But anyway, how can we keep up with all these decades that are happening this week?
Absolutely. And I will talk about whether or not they did or did not find the Ark of the Covenant revealed in newly released CIA files. My Thursday morning show, that's where I kind of talk about each day of the week. I have separated out into genres. I like to say Monday's world news and I play rock music. Tuesday's technology news and I play techno music. Wednesday's food news and I play country. Thursday is gross news. And that'll be perfect. The Ark of the Covenant. You know, all your cults and all those sorts of things. And after my Thursday morning monarchy is when I play the exclusive audio of these New World Next Week episodes. Only me, James, and Brock have heard them. And you can as well, and get the exclusive first airing Thursday mornings at around 10 a.m. Mountain Time. That is at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. And of course, NewWorldNextWeek.com is your source for Corbett and Monarchy gear that keeps us fear-free and, of course, advertising-free for our combined 30-plus years of work, James. There is 586. Whew.
You know, now that I think about it, you know, that title, that headline was totally wrong. They're not treating these deported people worse than they treated the Nazis because they haven't opened the Ark of the Covenant and melted their faces yet. So, you know, anyway. And I have to quibble. You started by saying that we would have a tranche of updates today, but you should have said a slurry of updates. That's the new word we're going to implement. It's the new World Next Week word. A slurry of updates.
Dude, You and I, if you and I had some sort of, language and word podcast, we would nerd out. 'Cause I think people might be surprised that I'm maybe the bigger hardcore word nerd. You did it wrong than you are. You're more of the anarchy of language kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm relaxed about the use of language.
That's what keeps this show great. I think we're a good balance. You got the class clown and the professor. And there it is, James. Appreciate you, buddy.
Take care. See you again soon.
Thanks.